The October edition of Clayco Group's webinar series is entitled Opportunities and Challenges in the Second and Third Tier Cities in China. What is the actual Chinese market? Many companies looking to enter China see the country as a whole, as one distinct market. However, this is a common mistake that foreign investors make when entering China for the first time. In reality, China is a patchwork of regional markets at various stages of their economic development. And these markets are bound together by one nation, but separated in differences with the government, communication, regional rivalries, and poor infrastructure. This is the reality of the Chinese market, and any company entering or expanding in it must be aware and prepared to deal with this reality if they want to be successful. This is what we're going to talk about today in this webinar series, is the opportunities and challenges that do exist in the second and third tier cities. But before we go into the webinar, I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me clearly. If you could raise your hand so that I could see that the sound and communication is working well. Please note that the presentation will be distributed to all participants at the end of this webinar as well. If you do have any questions, then please do submit them in the questions section. If there is time, we will do a very brief Q&A. Alternatively, I will be answering your questions directly to you by email. For those of you that are new to Clayco Group's webinar series or Clayco Group, just a brief introduction on who we are. Clayco Group is an international accounting and management consulting firm that is headquartered in Hong Kong. It has 10 operational offices in Asia, 8 of which are in China, and a new office in Singapore. We assist small, medium-sized companies in entering the China market as well as the Asian market as a whole and handling all the administrative functions that are required. A little bit about myself. My name is Christina Kohler. I'm a director at Clayco Group. I've been with the company for over 10 years now, and I've been assisting Western companies, Western as well as Australian companies, in entering the Chinese market in terms of their incorporations, liquidations, M&A transactions, and the general day-to-day administrative functions. I'm also co-author of our monthly magazine, ChinaInvest.biz, which can be easily subscribed to on our website if you're interested. So to start off today's presentation, I want to give a definition of actually what are second and third tier cities in China. As you can see here, the tier 1 cities are highlighted with a red dot. In reality, the tier 1 cities, they are 4 cities. It's Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou, although here Chongqing is also highlighted. The tier 2, tier 3 cities are all the cities that have stars associated with them. In general, the definition of a second and third tier city is that it has a population of more than 5 million people. It has a provincial GDP of at least 250 billion RMB. And then there are other considerations which also have to be factored in, such as the economic growth, the geography, the infrastructure, and the per capita GDP. Not all second and third tier cities are alike. You'll find differences if you head towards the north of China, particularly in Shenyang, Dalian, Tianjin, or even in the south if you're looking at cities such as Huizhou, Zhuhai, Foshan, etc. And then naturally in the west if you're looking at places such as Chengdu or Xi'an. Now, why are we looking at second and third tier cities? The reason behind actually doing this webinar was the statistic that I read in the McKinsey Global Institute research study, as well as a research study that was conducted by the Boston Consulting Group. They predict, the McKinsey Global Institute predicts that by 2025, 440 of the emerging market cities in China will generate 47% of the global growth. The Boston Consulting Group has projected that both wealth accumulation and consumption in these cities will actually surpass that of the first-tier cities within the next 2 to 3 years. And it is expected that more than half of the country's economic growth, so about a 60%, is expected to come from these cities by 2020, while 80% of the country's market for mid to high price fashion will originate there. So with these statistics alone, the second and third tier cities actually cannot be ignored. And it's time for companies who are looking to either come into the market or, more importantly, are looking to expand into the Chinese market to be aware of the potential that exists in these regions. Now, I've just mentioned the word regions because in actual fact, a mistake that many people do in China is that they look at each city as a city. In actual fact, it might just be easier for companies to look at clusters or regions within China in order to focus on their research on these areas. The mega clusters, if one would call them mega clusters, would be Shanghai, which encompasses Nanjing and Hangzhou in the south. You would also look at Guangzhou and Shenzhen in the southern China. In northern China, you might look at the Jing-Jin-Ji cluster, which encompasses Beijing, or the Shandong cluster, which encompasses Qingdao and Jinan. And if you look at the GDPs of these clusters, you'll actually notice that they match very closely to countries in Europe. If you see the Shanghai cluster, it actually is at the same level as Switzerland as a whole. So looking at these clusters is almost like looking at a country in Europe in itself. And that might make it a lot easier to focus on certain regions when entering the market or even just expanding in the market rather than focusing on cities or numerous cities within the country. In my opinion, if you're looking into consumer products, the tier 1 cities are generally oversaturated, so I would actually place the focus more on small or larger clusters versus the mega clusters. Now, what are the opportunities in the second and third tier cities? Well, as I had already mentioned, and Boston Consulting Group, as well as the McKinsey Global Institute, they've very easily highlighted the high economic growth that is available there. But more importantly, it's that there's less competition. If you're looking, for example, at the food and beverage sector, and you go into local supermarkets, foreign-owned supermarkets, as well as local-owned supermarkets in the tier 1 cities, you'll notice that 50, if not more than 50% of the products that are being sold there are actually foreign products that are imported into the region. If you go into a supermarket in Hangzhou, in Ningbo, in Wuxi, in Wuhan, you'll find that there's a lot less availability of foreign product. And as a consequence, there's a lot of potential and opportunity that's located in these areas. So if a wine producer would actually come to me and say that they would like to enter the Chinese market, where should they start? I definitely would not recommend the tier 1 cities, which are oversaturated with wine retailers and the wine availability that is stocked in the supermarkets, but rather look at the second and third tier cities as their market entry point. The third point is urbanization. The infrastructure in these areas is improving dramatically. There's a lot of capital that is being spent on urbanizing cities, improving the infrastructure, and making sure that things can run smoothly. There's pools of skilled labor. What was very interesting for me is that reading the airline magazines from United Airlines and Lufthansa, I saw one-page advertisements from Chengdu highlighting that their laborers, and not just blue-collar workers, but actual skilled laborers, were remaining in Chengdu versus relocating to the tier 1 cities. So there is a pool of talent that's available in these tier 2, tier 3 cities where the laborers are not actually willing to move anymore into the tier 1 cities, potentially because there's less job availability there. There's a much lower cost of living. Housing is skyrocketing in Shanghai, for example. Rents are going up about 20-30% per year, depending on where you want to live, obviously. But in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, the growth rate in terms of cost of living is at a much more stable rate and much more affordable for companies that are looking to relocate there. There's an expanding middle class, which actually is the most important point to mention here, particularly if you're looking to do retail or sales into the tier 2, tier 3 cities. This middle class has money to spend, and obviously they need introduction into foreign brands because they're not aware of what's available in the market. They only see what is available when they go to the tier 1 cities. As I mentioned on my earlier slide, focus on industrial clusters, look at regions versus looking at cities in terms of entering the markets. Remember that local governments are eager to attract foreign investment. With the Go West campaign, Chengdu and Chongqing are trying to attract industries as well as retailers to come into the region. There is a disadvantage to that, which I will go into in the challenges section, but it should be kept in mind that there are preferential treatments that are being initiated. It is a priority for the state in the next 5-year plan to develop the West. There's been focus placed on this. There's also focus placed on the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. So there should be attractive packages available from the government to go into these regions. What are the challenges that are being found in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities? Well, obviously, finding Western qualified Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that I lost connection. Can everybody hear me again? If you can, please raise your hands. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for that. I lost the Wi-Fi connection. That's the disadvantage of doing webinars, is that you have the risk of always losing your Wi-Fi. Let me continue on with our presentation. One moment, please. And let me go back to the slides. I apologize for this. So the challenges really in the second and third tier cities is that it's very difficult to find Western qualified as well as Western experienced employees. And what's been an interesting trend now is that many multinationals that are relocating to the second and third tier cities have been trying to also relocate their local management, which means actually Chinese managers who have been trained have the experience working in these multinationals in the tier 1 cities and asking them to relocate to develop the businesses in the second and third tier cities. And what's been fascinating is that these local managers have been requesting expatriate packages in order to move to these locations because for them they feel it will be a hardship move. This has been an interesting trend to see. And I see it not stopping, actually. In addition to that, if you're looking at expatriates who are relocating to the region, many of them have problems in finding foreign schools, and all these locations are not ideal compared to living in the tier 1 cities. Incentives from the local governments can be deceiving, and this is something that I have found to be true. As I mentioned previously, in the opportunities that are available is that a lot of local governments are trying to give preferential treatments, but they give these preferential treatments verbally versus in writing. And as a consequence to that, once the company is established and you believe that you're going to obtain all these preferential treatments, in the end of the day you find out that the official has actually forgotten that he's given this to you, and as a consequence you don't get certain tax rates or certain rental-free periods, etc. It's very important when you are negotiating with the local governments in these tier 2, tier 3 cities that you have everything in writing, and preferably that you have everything chopped as well with the government chop in order to make sure that it's exact. One of the reasons and the challenges that a lot of companies have relocating into, or one of the reasons a lot of companies are relocating into the second and third tier cities is that rental prices or property prices in the tier 1 cities have increased tremendously. Obviously property prices, land prices, utility prices are much lower in the second and third tier cities, but you do see that this is increasing and will increase over time. Examples of, I wanted to give some examples of the tier 2 and tier 3 cities and the types of companies that are located there to show you the development that is occurring, particularly with multinationals that are relocating there. Hangzhou is the first on the list. Hangzhou is located south of Shanghai. It's about a 45-minute train ride now from Shanghai, so quite convenient. Has a population of about 1.9 million people and has been traditionally known as the garment, textile, yarn, sector, having been focused there. However, there are now mobile giants such as Motorola and relocated there, as well as Coca-Cola, United Biscuits, and there is actually a trend of Taiwanese companies moving into this area. For me, I find Hangzhou quite a generalist city, meaning that any type of industry could actually locate there, which makes it quite of a flexible city as well. What's been interesting for me is that they have developed foreign schools, so there are foreign schools now located in Hangzhou, and I have seen a trend that for a lot of Europeans that are being asked to relocate to China, many of them that have children are more willing to move into Hangzhou because of the greenery that's available, which is very similar to Europe, and it's less industrial or busy like in Shanghai. Tianjin, as well, in my opinion, is very generalist. There are industries that are located in those areas. What's been fascinating for me is that where there's been single-digit growth in China over the last year and will also be the case in 2013, Tianjin had a GDP growth of 16% in 2010, and that growth hasn't slowed down. It is the highest growth city in China. And also what's interesting is that all the back office or call centers of many of the foreign banks such as HSBC and Standard Chartered have their call centers located in Tianjin. It's also only a 25-30 minute train ride from Beijing, which also has the advantage. Chengdu is up and coming, and as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I was amazed to find in the in-flight magazines of Lufthansa and United one-page advertising promotions promoting Chengdu. I've also seen promotions at international airports, on CNN, and it's very interesting to see that a city in China is actually really pushing for inward investment into the region. Big companies have located there. Intel was one of the first multinationals to be located there, and there are also a lot of auto manufacturers, and Microsoft as well has moved out there. Harbin has been the most interesting growth for me. If many of you don't know Harbin, Harbin is all the way up in the north of China. It's very, very cold. The winters have minus 30, 35 degrees. And it has now become actually a digital media cluster for many companies because it allows servers to be cooled down throughout the year. In summers, it only gets as high as about 20, 22, 23 degrees. As a result of that, it's been a magnificent place for the digital media industry to actually locate there. Nanjing, similar to Hangzhou and Tianjin, is for me a generalist city. There are a variety of companies that are located there. Majority, however, or traditionally have been in the chemical sector. Dalian as well, up and coming, and quite a generalist city as well in terms of industries that are located there. Wuhan and Wuxi are the most up-and-coming cities, and there's a lot of universities located there as well as research institutes that are just on the same par, same level as Beijing and Shanghai. So there's a whole room of skilled laborers located there for companies that are looking to locate there. Incentive strategies, as I mentioned to you earlier, there is this Go West campaign that was initiated actually 10 years ago, but in the next 5-year plan, it has been shown that the Chinese government is going to be very much focused on it. If you see on the map, the section all in purple is considered to be as part of the Go West campaign. It includes 6 provinces, 5 autonomous regions, and the municipality of Chongqing. It encompasses just over 71% of the territory of China and has around 30% of the population located in that area. Now, what I see and what my opinion is on the Go West campaign is that the initiative actually is excellent. It's trying to promote the region, trying to move manufacturing. Actually, the goal is to try and move manufacturing into these areas so that the Tier 1 cities, which are all on the East Coast, can become more service-oriented or more tertiary-oriented. The result of this Go West campaign, however, has been that the focus of the government has been on 2 cities, Chengdu and Chongqing. And the majority of the growth has been focused on Chengdu and Chongqing and has occurred in Chengdu and Chongqing. Most of the multinationals have relocated there. Most of the 5-star hotels are located there. And it seems that the SMEs are following in that direction as well. What this has caused is a decrease in investment in the rest of the area. The focus has only been on these 2 cities, which unfortunately has caused then the other cities to deteriorate, actually because they don't get a focus on the infrastructure or anything to improve their locations. One thing to note, which has occurred actually since the first half of this year, is the catalog of priority industries for foreign direct investment, which has been updated. There were 500 encouraged industries covering 22 provinces, and they have now added 173 new categories, and they've included Hainan as part of the new Western catalog. Their focus has really been more on ecotourism, environmental projects, as well as public services such as gas, heat, water supply. So with this whole new 173 new categories available there, it's very important for companies to see whether they can be based in China without actually having to establish joint ventures. So for companies that are looking to go into China and are looking to place their focus on the lower tier cities, here's a type of early business plan which I would always tell my clients to consider or to start thinking on how to create their business plans. If you're looking to go into the second tier and third tier cities, the first question is, who am I actually going to employ to manage my business in the lower tier cities? Are you going to start off with an agent first, who's going to start selling your products or is going to start doing your market research in those areas? Are you going to have a department responsible in the headquarter overseas or in your headquarter in China? Will you second expatriates? Will you second local managers? Are you going to have a mixed culture in these offices? There's a whole series of questions that need to be asked on who are you going to employ to manage these businesses and who's going to be then under these people. What are you actually going to do in the lower tier cities? The reason that I mention this is because if you are actually a trading entity in the tier 1 cities and you now have decided to start manufacturing, you actually need to first set up a manufacturing facility separated from your trading entity. Unfortunately, you cannot set up a manufacturing branch office through your trading entity in your tier 1 city. There's this one restriction. So it's very important to know what you're actually going to do in the lower tier cities. How is it going to affect your business licenses if you already have an entity in China? And then you need to have your business scope set out as well. Where is the business going to be in the short and the long term? A lot of my clients, they always focus on the short term, which is generally 1 to 5 years. The key is also to understand where your business is going to be in 5 to 10 years' time, if not longer. The reason why I mention this is because if you are planning eventually to liquidate your companies in China, the process is extremely tedious and can take between 18 to 24 months to complete. As a result of that, you really should know from the beginning, or you should at least do your research from the beginning, and that leads me to point 4, to know exactly why you're going there, what are your goals, what are your strategies for your market penetration so that you don't have to get into a phase of liquidation. When are you planning your entry? It's very good to do a business plan now, but you should execute it within this period as well. If you execute it only in 1 year's time, all the laws and regulations in China will change, and you might even find better places to locate your business compared to today. So when you are preparing your business plan, make sure you update it regularly if you've decided to prolong the period, and keep it in mind to review your business plan at the point that you actually want to execute it. Now I want to focus on some case studies, and I'm going to specifically focus on fashion brands in the second and third tier cities because this is really what's being talked about right now in the market, is the retail sector, how it's expanding into the second and third tier cities, how e-commerce is being affected as well. It's very simple to realize that for the industrial sector, manufacturing is moving actually from the tier 1 cities to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities in order to save cost. In addition to that, many companies are also setting up subsidiary plants, manufacturing facilities in countries such as Vietnam, Bangladesh, Myanmar, also to save cost, with the obstacle of having poor infrastructure in those areas compared to China as a whole. So to focus first on the trends for the fashion brands, there was the CEO of Chanel, who made a very interesting statement in January of this year. She said that Chanel needs to stay exclusive. Its strategy should not be to be everywhere in China. Its strategy should be to stay exclusive and to be in unique areas in China in order to attract and to build the brand name of Chanel in China. One problem that many retailers have had is that by relocating into the second and third tier cities, is that they go into the malls. This is generally the first step because the culture in China is to go to shopping malls to shop. But the problem is that the owners of these shopping malls don't understand the difference between high fashion brands, medium fashion brands, and fast food joints. There's one shopping mall in Hangzhou which always struck me as odd because you will have Louis Vuitton on one level and right next to it you'll have McDonald's, which kind of contradicts one to the other. So it's very important to understand also the dynamics that exist in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities when you're a high-end fashion brand or even a medium-end fashion brand and you want to promote your brand and the quality of your brand to be a certain level. One of the biggest additional problems that the high-end fashion brands have had is finding good quality salespeople in their stores who can portray the image of the fashion brand. In addition to that, many of the shopping malls, which have been developing exponentially into the Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, is that they have very low occupancy rates. And as a consequence, they're not necessarily getting the flow of customers as needed. One of the biggest dilemmas, not necessarily with Chanel or Louis Vuitton or Dior or Burberry, but really with medium to high-end fashion brands, is that the consumers in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities have no clue what these brands are. They've never been educated on it. They've never seen advertising on it. And this is why a lot of these brands now are placing huge capital investments in PR, getting actors and actresses, local actors and actresses to promote the brands, and doing TV spots, etc. It's also been found that many people in the Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, they're more focused on e-commerce versus actually going shopping and going to retail stores. That has been one of the strategies of Burberry, actually, is that with the expansion of developing approximately 25 new stores by the end of 2014, they're simultaneously developing their own online platform in order to be able to sell their goods in China. So there are a lot of different strategies that people are taking compared to the Western world, and you need to take this in mind when you're entering the market. So lastly, what considerations do you need to take on when you are entering China, when you're entering or expanding into the Tier 2, Tier 3 cities? Well, like I mentioned in my introduction, China is not one market. Not all cities are alike. So do your research. Some second and third tier cities will continue to experience double-digit growth, such as Tianjin, but you really should choose your markets or your clusters wisely. Know your product, know your customer, and see how it actually all fits together. Advertise. Do your PR. There are so many consulting companies available to you in the Chinese market that are familiar on how to attract customers. So find public relations firms, do TV advertising, doing online marketing, publications, product launches. These are all important tools in order to attract your consumers. And if you're not selling now, but you're producing in China now, you got to also think long-term on how this will affect your Asian market. Maybe at some point you will need to consider to sell locally as well. And at that point, also think about your structuring and what needs to be done in that regard. As many of you may have heard, the pilot zone of the Shanghai Free Trade Zone has just opened up about 3 weeks ago. And I believe that this will play a significant role in the development of the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. The highlights of the Shanghai Free Trade Zone has been that the RMB will be internationalized. In addition to that, for several industries that are already accepted locally in the market, application procedures to set up these companies will be relatively quick. Probably, I would assume, the same time frames as in Hong Kong and Singapore, so just a few weeks. In addition to that, they've opened up a series of I believe, just over 100 industries which were previously prohibited in China. Now they're on the negative list, which basically means they can set up in this free trade zone, but the application procedures will be lengthy. But they're free to do it on their own without actually establishing joint ventures. The Shanghai Free Trade Zone is a very small area of land in Shanghai. I think that there will be problems in providing supply of land to companies, but I've also heard that there are several other regions such as Chongqing, Qianhai in Shenzhen that have already started their application procedures to follow the rules and regulations that are being set forth in this pilot zone. So it could be that other regions in China will follow very quickly. The pilot program is supposed to last 3 years, and if it is successful, then it will be spread throughout the region. The concept is very similar to the VAT reform that has occurred in the last 2 years. So if it is successful, it will be rolled out slowly into all of China. One of the biggest points for many companies is that trade flow will be simplified, so there'll be new regulations in the customs departments. Tax departments will also have new regulations following. And one thing to keep in mind, especially if you are in the retail sector, e-commerce will be freely open, and it will be much easier to import goods because the customs regulations will change. So this is something to keep in mind if you are looking into come into China. Maybe second and third tier cities won't be as beneficial any longer, and perhaps the Shanghai Free Trade Zone will be an added benefit. That's the end of today's presentation. I hope that you've all enjoyed it. If you are interested in joining next month's presentation, please do not hesitate to subscribe on our events section of our website. Thank you all for joining, and again, apologies for the mishap with the Wi-Fi. Thank you again, and hope to see you all again soon. Good evening.